Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with some macro thoughts. A very interesting piece in Bloomberg View, preparing for the post-QE world. Over the past 8 years, the major central banks have increased their balance sheets to $18 trillion from $6, predominantly through the purchase of their own government's bonds. While the Fed has ended its QE program, the European Central Bank and Bank of Japan continue theirs, but those too will eventually come to an end. What happens next will determine whether the world economy is set on a path to real growth or further stagnation. Unwinding these positions even progressively as the acquired assets mature would almost certainly create deflation and a financial crash, as it would lead to the withdrawal of massive amounts of liquidity from the financial system. Instead, we're likely to see what Adair Turner, the former chairman of the Financial Services Authority, recently called a permanent monetization. This is a fact. Permanent monetization may be inevitable given the risks and difficulties entailed in doing the asset accretion that happened under QE. It can prove beneficial too, since central banks are ultimately owned by governments. Absorbing the QE purchases would effectively mean that governments would own their own bonds, assets that comprise a significant share of national debt. And then saying, recognizes this changes the national debt picture. The newly consolidated national debt will be markedly lower once the assets acquired by the central banks through QE are subtracted. But there are risks as well. Permanent monetization assumes that the assets purchased through QE will never be settled by the debtor, the governments that issued them. Over the last few sessions, we've seen big spikes in Bund, gilt, and US bond yields. US 10-year up to a high of 1.8%, 10-year bond yields 0.06%, gilts at 104%. That was yesterday, a bit of a bounce today. This goes back to what I was writing about the falcon cannot hear the falconer, losing control of the narrative. And I was saying, although I agree with that Bloomberg View perspective, that the markets will eventually not hear the signals, turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. And then on the 12th of September, I was quoting Hotel California, mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice. And she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the nightman. We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. And on the 12th of September, I said my second trade of the year, the first was to be long the yen from January, was to buy put options on 10-year bonds. Because I said this is going to pop, and when it pops, the wizardry won't work anymore. And at that moment, there is going to be one heck of a move. Home thoughts, I like this photograph from David Yarrow. The high grass makes this image. It gives scale and contextual detail. Then this photograph by him again, a powerful unity suggested by this image caught yesterday in the heat of the Amboseli day. Picture I took of the evening in the Amboseli a few years ago. Amboseli National Park is a wonderful place, 8,000 square kilometer ecosystem. It's 392 kilometers squared in that ecosystem. Local people, mainly Maasai, intensive agriculture, some settlement on the edge of the park, which has caused a problem, but extraordinary for their free-ranging elephants. It means place of dust. It hasn't rained here for 4 months, and it shows. David Yarrow again. And finally, some elephants. I photograph of a matriarch I took. When I saw her from behind, I realized the sheer size of her. And you can't, it's as if you could, they step so lightly. They're like ballet dancers. We were so close. We didn't hear a thing. Jorge Luis Borges, the mind was dreaming, the world was its dream. And this beautiful site at Muthunkari police station from Freddie Omondi, Jacaranda propaganda. Political reflections, Nate Silver doubling down on a loyal 35% of the electorate is an uncannily brilliant strategy in a 17-way primary, but not looking so hot in the general. Trump trails Clinton by 8 points after the tape scandal. He tweeted this, "Don't let her fool us again." He's really speaking to his dieharders now. He had a chance, I thought, but, well, it still does, but it's considerably less than it was. Let's move on. Amid Syrian chaos, Iran's game plan emerges, a path to the Mediterranean. Interesting piece in The Guardian, talking about how Iran is looking for a route to the Mediterranean and achieves it through Syria. Quoting Soleimani, who said, "If we lose Syria, we lose Tehran." Pro-democracy lawmaker Yao Wei-ching displays a banner before taking an altered version of the oath at the Legislative Council in Hong Kong. International markets, I found somebody else who likes reading Paul Virilio. Flash Crash UK, what theorist of speed Paul Virilio calls speculation in the futurism of the instant. Sterling is trading like an emerging market currency. That's what Bloomberg is citing. Take a look at that. Currency markets, let's take a quick look. Euro dollar 110.20. Dollar index 97.85. Japanese yen 103.83. The pound 121.78. Aussie, last time I looked, let's have a look, 0.7542. India rupee 66.795, South Korean won 1131.55, the Rial 320.22, the Egyptian pound 8.88865, and the Rand 1427.38. Of course, we've talked about the Rand already. The language of Brexit is hard-edged and is not considering the impact on the financial markets at all. The sterling pound has become a prisoner of the hard-edged rhetoric I wrote over the weekend. FT sterling pulls back, yes, again, as David Davis speaks, back under 122. Remarkably, the Eurosceptics, whose great cause was to restore the UK Parliament's sovereignty over Brussels, do not actually want MPs to have a real say over Britain's aims in the negotiations. At last week's Tory conference, the hardliners were convinced by Theresa May that she is heading for a hard Brexit outside the single European market. As one former champion of Parliament's supremacy told me, we have won. Why should we risk upsetting that? I'm sure Parliament will endorse the Prime Minister's deal at the end of the process. Trade-weighted sterling hit a record low on Tuesday. Keep an eye on 10-year gilt yields, which are hovering around the 1% mark. And that takes me back to Virilio. Wealth is the hidden side of speed, and speed the hidden side of wealth. Commodity markets, the most surprising commodity rally of the year continues to surprise. Price doubles from Q3 to Q4 to $200. This is steel. Gold, let's have a quick look at where that is. 1260 area. I think it's going to lurch lower again. WTI crude at $50.50. Let's see how we get on from here. I tend to think we've done enough to the upside now. Platinum has entered a bear market, according to David Inglis, and cotton prices soared after the US lowered its supply forecast for next year. The emerging markets, Saudi Arabia relies on oil for 3/4 of its income. Crude revenue has slumped 68% since 2011 to $89 billion. That doesn't look right this year, and a supply glut, but it's down by 1/3 from the peak, down by 2/3 from the peak. 1997 crisis redux, Thailand's benchmarks index SETI extends drop, and baht falls most since 2013 amid concern over King's health. Sub-Saharan Africa, very interesting article in the Rand Daily Mail. The deep ugly cunning of the Zuma cabal. Zuma is a wily beast, slouching ungainly like a hyena along the dark edges of government. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan is now to be charged with fraud. Zuma still faces 783 corruption charges that a High Court ordered the NPA to reinstate, but they did nothing. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people are saying these NPA charges against Gordhan are politically motivated and are just intimidation. High-profile people such as Jay Naidu, Saifa Pitiana, Moletsi Beki, Trevor Manuel, Jackson Matembu, retired judges, constitutional experts, analysts, political commentators have joined the outrage. They should lead a concerted Zuma Resign Now campaign. He's a wily beast, slouching ungainly like a hyena along the dark edges of government, using his intelligence training, a deep, ugly cunning, and captured individuals to power his patronage networks. Smokes and mirrors, false flags, undercover ops help achieve his nefarious aims. Why is he always out of the country when major actions occur? The clearest recent example in the early morning presser called today by Juma's NPA lapdog Sean Abrahams. His bombshell was that Gordhan would be charged. The rand plunged and social media went insane. While Tina Jomet Pettersson quietly announced that Eskom would handle the nuclear build procurement. Oh, the public distracted while Zuma quietly ensures his Russian pension kickback. R1 trillion at stake, card trick. Goldman Sachs sees a sharpening of knives in South Africa's ANC, saying the rand's reaction on Tuesday was less than could have been the case, Goldman said. The market's not thinking Pravin will be fired. Put up a photograph of President Zuma, who was in Kenya for 3 days until yesterday. Ethiopia has admitted the death toll at anti-regime protests may exceed 500. Mr. Haile Mariam said there had been at least 170 deaths in the region of Oromia and 120 in Amara since demonstrations began last November. When you add it up, it could be more than 500. John Ashworth, an economist with Capital Economics, said that there is a clear risk that an escalation in violence poses a serious threat to Ethiopia's economy. That's a fact. HRWs talk about how anger is boiling over in Ethiopia. Hundreds of interviews Human Rights Watch has carried out with protesters, witnesses, victims since the protests began. It is clear that each act of brutality by the military, the same military now tasked with restoring law and order, further emboldens the protest movement. Until Ethiopians can voice their views about critical issues such as development and governance, anger and frustration will likely continue, plunging the country into further uncertainty, possibly toward even more dire and irreversible human rights crisis. As I said before, the reaction is not working. Congo political rift likely to spark large-scale violence, warning by the UN. DRC has entered a period of extreme risk to its stability. The coming period will certainly be extremely difficult. The tipping point in the serious violence could be reached very quickly. And it's interesting, isn't it, ironic that they've been the poster child, particularly for the industrialization of sub-Saharan Africa. And Virilio's quote, revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production but in the street. And I was asking, there's a threshold beyond which the incumbent cannot go. Where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. I was asking, is it 1,000? Is it 10,000? South Africa's rand is at a close to 1 month low over concerns about the minister. South African all share down 1.69% this year. Nigeria all share down 2.15% this year. The Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 11.29% this year. Transport Minister James Macharia has put Kenya Airways bosses on notice. After 3 weeks or so, we shall begin taking action based on the findings and recommendations of the audit report. Anyone found culpable shall be held to account. Based on the nature of the findings, we shall take appropriate actions. We could see some people leave the company, while others could end up in court. The executive as constituted is no longer credible, especially in front of a major capital raising exercise. Kenya Airways is trading at 3-month highs, however. Central Bank of Kenya had role in imperial collapse. This is the response from the shareholders. CBK officers were compromised not to inspect books. Shareholders have also learned, and the former governor Juguna Dungu had a more than cozy relationship with Imperial Bank MD Abdul Malik Jan Mohammed. The shareholders said in the court papers, Jan Mohammed has since died. Sudden death, Mr. Jan Mohammed. Nairobi all share down 5.95% this year. African bourses are beating the NSE on the back of the bank rate capping bill. The all shares down about 5.8% year to date. Safaricom, the only gain in the third quarter on the back of the company issuing a special interim dividend. Cooperative Bank equity, KCB, DTB and Barclays have declined heavily. Cooperative by 25.3%, equity 20.1%, KCB 17%, DTB 15.8%, and Barclays 15.1% respectively. Zuma is considering President Kenyatta's request for South African visas on arrival for Kenyans. This is a significant issue. The Nairobi NSE 20 is down 19.64% so far this year. Once again, thank you for stopping by.